Hey guys, this is John Kalam from KHL Motorsport, and I'd like to welcome you to the Contact Patch Podcast, where the rubber meets the road. And this is episode 2. I was supposed to record this much earlier. In the first video, I did tell you that my sister came down with appendicitis. She had the surgery, and now I think it has been 2 weeks since we sent her to the hospital, and now she has been out for some time and she seems to be normal. I haven't seen her in the past couple of days, but from conversations, she has been, or at least returning to her chipper self nowadays. So that's something that's good. But unfortunately for me, quite some time after that, I developed a cough with phlegm that does not want to quit after more than a week. So right now I'm taking medication, and that was the reason why I couldn't record, because I had no voice, and up to now I still am a little bit croaky. As compared to the past couple of days, it has been a struggle to talk quite normally. So Alhamdulillah, I'm hopefully on the road to recovery. I'm taking antibiotics, but I'm well enough to talk long and record this episode for you guys. Something notable that happened in between the first episode and now. I was able to see the online launch of the new Civic Type R. It seems to have the same engine, still 300 horsepower, still the K20C turbo, still front wheel drive, but the major difference is it is 11th generation Honda Civic. When I first saw the 11th gen, I wasn't too impressed with the looks. Looks like a beluga whale in the front end. So that was slightly disappointing. But the Civic Type R, based on the pictures, the chassis code FL5, it's something, based on the pictures, it looks good inside and out. Looks way better than the FK8, the previous generation. I like this FL5 much better, appearance-wise. Of course, it remains to be seen if really dynamically handling-wise, is the FL5 better than the FK8? Well, that we will leave to the professional journalists to let us know. But in the meantime, it's pretty cool that Honda is still developing such enthusiast vehicles for us to aspire to buy. And hopefully this gets released in the Philippines. Well, the FK8 was released in the Philippines in limited numbers. Hopefully the FL5 will be as well. But if you were to ask me, I'll still look strongly at the Hyundai N models, because of course I'm a Korean car enthusiast. If Hyundai Philippines will be releasing the N variants locally, I was under the impression that the previous distributor of Hyundai vehicles brought in the Veloster N in indent order basis. So hopefully the new distributor of Hyundai, hopefully they decide to eventually bring in the N models. I'm looking forward to the Kona N, of course, Veloster N, or the European models, the i30N or the i20N. Those seem to be very interesting vehicles. Hopefully, I aspire to also own such vehicles in the near and distant future. But in the meantime, I have to build my own enthusiast vehicle. Speaking of that, we're still continuing to build our project Hyundai Coupe all-wheel drive. If you guys don't know about our project car, you could check out our YouTube channel, KHL Motorsport Kohol Garage. And we have a playlist showing you what we are doing with our Hyundai Coupe 1997 as we converted it to all-wheel drive and fitted in a turbocharged engine. But in summary, what the car is, it's a 1997 Hyundai Coupe. It's called the Tiburon in Korea. It's called the Tiburon in the US. But in other parts of the world, including the Philippines, it was released as the Hyundai Coupe. It was complete, but it was a flooded car. The engine was also in very poor condition. So we found that out when we transplanted it to another car. And we also had the Subaru BG5 Legacies lying around. I wanted to have a project car that was all-wheel drive and to drive it spiritedly and have the insane traction that all-wheel drive provides. But I'm afraid of Subarus. I'm afraid of Boxers. But knowing what I know now about 4G63s, I think I could bite the bullet for building a Subaru next time. But anyway, I digress. But what the Subaru Legacy had was, of course, it's four-wheel drive, and the rear suspension was a great match to the rear end of the Hyundai Elantra Hyundai Coupe. It's also a McPherson strut rear, dual diagonal lower links. There are a few major differences. To mount the subframe to the body is very minimal work that was needed to be done on that aspect. So we were able to do that within the first week of ownership of the coupe shell. And after that one, we thought of looking for an engine that had an all-wheel drive drivetrain that fits very well in the engine bay. So the only logical thing that's relatively available here in the Philippines is an Lancer Evo engine. We decided to go with the cheapest one, which is an Evo 4 powertrain, which is somewhat regrettable because apparently the Evo 4 is the suckiest of the 4G63 engines. The suckiest third gen, the one that came from the Evo 4 to 9. That Evo 4 is the suckiest one because it is the first one to be flipped the opposite way from the previous generation 4G63. The old 4G63s, the engine's on the driver's side. For whatever reason, Mitsubishi flipped the engine position to the passenger side. The 4G63 also became flipped. They moved it to the passenger side, which is perfect for us because the Hyundai Beta engine, as mounted to the Hyundai Coupe, the engine's also mounted on the passenger side. So it's basically the same orientation. So that made things like the engine support a bit easier because they were roughly located at the same side anyway and at the same position. So that made things slightly easier for us when we did the conversion. But since the Evo 4 was the first one to be in the new position, maybe they cheapened out on the pistons. I don't know. The Evo 4 pistons were known to be relatively weak, the alloy used. And they could not handle power as much as the Evo 5 to 9s. Ringland failure, which I thought was a problem with the EJ20 turbos. But apparently, it's a problem also with the Evo 4. And to top that issue, this was the issue that sidelined us. We experienced crank walk. The crankshaft's supposed to be steady in a particular place and just spin. And that's being held by a bearing called a thrust washer. So all reciprocating engines have a thrust washer. Okay, that limits the axial movement of the crankshaft. These Evo 4 engines and also the second gen DSMs with the 7-bolt. The issue is that the thrust washer is integral to the main bearing. I don't know if they made it as a cost-saving thing or what. But the issue is, if you experience lubrication issues, instead of just wearing down the main bearing, you also wear down the thrust washer, which results in the crankshaft rocking back and forth and destroying the block. And so we have a junk Evo 4 block right now. So that sucks. But what we did was to change the engine. While the popular and easier method to do is to acquire a Mitsubishi Outlander block. It has the great internals of the Evo 7 to 9. Superior block that can handle a lot of power even on stock internals. We didn't go that route. For the price we paid for the Evo engine, the Outlander engine wasn't that far off. So it wasn't very cheap. It's like buying another Evo 4 engine. So we found something much better and much worse at the same time. Much better because it is a Hyundai engine. We're using a Hyundai engine in a Hyundai car. Hyundai and Mitsubishi were like brother and sister relationship back in the day. So there was a lot of technology transfer, and one of the technologies transferred to Hyundai for the use of Hyundai was the 4G63 engine under the Sirius nameplate. So the last Hyundai 4G63 was the Sirius 2, and that was found in the Sonata, Santa Fe, and I think also the Trajet, and also some Kias like the Optima, and few other Kias. So we were able to find a Sonata engine. In the US, you can easily get a 2.4 liter G4JS, 2.4 liters. In Korea, you can't find that. So what we were able to find from an importer was the 2-liter version, which was the G4JP. The issue with that is, well, you don't get the displacement. That's basically it. And there are some engine swap things that we had to face and modify in order for this particular engine to work. As of this recording, the engine's still not in the car. There's still a few more niggles that we have to figure out in order for us to get the car running again. Alright, we have this G4JP. How do we make this engine crazier? We can always swap in the Evo 4 pistons again. It'll functionally be an Evo 4 engine again. Anyway, I don't need more than 300 horsepower, so the crank pistons are okay. The Sonata engine resolves the crankwalk issue because the thrust washers are not integral anymore. They're separate from the main bearing, so that's something good. And that's basically solving the issue of crankwalk. But the negative part of it is, if you Lancer Evo owner want to consider using the Sonata 2.0 engine, it's not worth it for you. For the effort you have to do, and what does not make it easy is the timing belt side of the engine. Oil pump cover is very different. Position 1 sprocket is different. So it does not allow you to use the timing belt and other components from the Evo 4. So what we're using now is all Sonata parts. For the timing belt, tensioners work. Balance shaft is this balance shaft belt, we're using Evo Mitsubishi stuff. But for the timing belt, we have to use the Hyundai one, and there's no other car that uses the timing belt except the Sonata engine. The what you call the pitch of the teeth of the timing belt is different from Mitsubishi and Hyundai for whatever reason. We can't use cam gears, adjustable cam gears for an Evo. So we are using the Sonata cam gears. However, we are using the Evo 4 head. The thermostat cover of the Sonata is plastic as compared to aluminum. I don't know. I prefer the aluminum parts as compared to the plastic parts because the plastic parts easily break if you have some impact to it. So we decided to just go with the Evo 4 head. There's nothing to do also with the head because the car did not overheat, so there's no worry about the head. The engine's really a hybrid, a mishmash of Mitsubishi and Hyundai parts. Block is, of course, Hyundai. Oil sump is Hyundai. But the major difference is actually the internals, guys. When we cranked walked the Evo engine, I was like, we need a new crank. Well, we had the Sonata crank. It was 2 liter and it would still work. I decided to take the opportunity, if it arose, to look for a 4G64 crank. I guess the stars aligned, and it was with the will and grace of God that we were able to source the very next day a surplus crank locally. It came from a 4G64 GDI. So the crank needed, if this engine was a full-bore race engine, the guys with money will just say, let's just use a new crank. For us, our engine power goals are not high. 300 at the wheels, we're happy. Whatever the limit of the stock Evo 7 clutch is, because we're running the Evo 7 clutch assembly, it's bigger than the Evo 4. Theoretically, it handles more torque than the Evo 4 items. They say it can do 350 at the wheels. If we put it at 300, the stock clutch will last forever, and that's what we want only. 300 wheel horsepower is gonna be no joke, guys. My Elantra V6, my estimate is about 150 to 170 wheel, and it's not a slow car, guys. It has torque for days, guys. What more is 300 wheel horsepower? My Elantra is 1,200 kilos. Maybe the coupe is 1,300 kilos. And you double the horsepower. Wow. Wouldn't that be an amazing car to drive? I can't really wait also to get it running. Okay, there are a few things that we put onto it also. Case in point, the connecting rods. We just bought from China. It's a max speeding rods connecting rod. Not very expensive. Practically half the cost of the nearest cheapest branded connecting rod. It should be as good as the branded stuff. It's also made out of 4340 alloy, forged with ARP studs, rod bolts rather. The only reason why we're running forged rods is because we have to run forged pistons. We have to run stroker pistons. Stroker pistons are pistons that have a shorter compression height, meaning to say that the piston pin is located higher towards the top of the piston than standard. So we're running manly pistons. And that was the cheapest forged stroker piston that you could buy. So now our engine is a 2.3 liter stroker. It should be insane on the street because we're running the Evo 4 Turbo, which is actually the same size as the Evo 4 to 8 turbos, but it has a turbine housing size of 9 cm as compared to the Evo 5 and 6, which has a 10.5 cm opening for the turbine housing. So this car should be a very quick spool. It will not make power at a high RPM. Who cares? We don't want to rev it past the red line. Maybe if end of the world is 6,500 RPM, it should be enough because this car has a short ratio gearbox anyway. Evo 4 GSR gearbox has a 4.5 final drive. It's not the RS with an even shorter 4.8. We're running the stock Evo 4 cam, so there's no gain that we're gonna get on high RPM. We could replace it with what I'm looking at is the Kelford 272 low lift cams. I think that would be perfect for us with our 2.3 stroker. I think this car will be crazy already as is. It will not be a dyno queen. Unfortunately, I will not be able to regale a lot of you armchair mechanics with the dyno figures that we're gonna get. Yeah, that's about it for the engine. I talked a lot about the engine because there are a lot of minutiae about the engine that people don't understand. When you're building something custom, even though it's not 100% to a level that I would be, because I'm not an OC guy, I'm not an obsessive compulsive guy. Make it work well, but you don't have to sweat all the tiny details. Sweat the small stuff, but not the granular cellular stuff. It's not worth your time. It's not worth the ulcers. Regardless, even though it's not built to that ultra high standard, it's just built to a normal overhaul standard. The engine. There are a lot of things that we had to do. A lot of small things that when you're doing a custom car, it's par for the course. Another complication that we are looking at is also literally fitting the new engine back to the car. The Evo 4 to 9 uses just one serpentine belt to drive the aircon compressor, water pump, alternator, power steering pump. It's all just one belt. That allows easy packaging on a very small car like the Lancer. But the thing is, this engine came from a Sonata, which is a bigger car. Basically, the Sonata is the Galant of Hyundai. So since there's a lot of room in the Sonata, what they did was to use two drive belts. So there's one drive belt for the water pump and alternator, and there's another drive belt for the aircon and power steering. So that makes packaging things a bit tighter towards the passenger side frame rail. So I don't know if it will clear. And I don't know if we have to cut more of the frame rail to make it work. So let's see what it will entail for us as we get the engine installed and eventually running. But anyway, we have an angle grinder, we have acetylene. If we can't make it fit, we'll have to make it fit somehow, some way. So it's really, these things are things that you don't even consider when you're doing a custom car. It's just so easy to put in bolt on stuff that you can buy for your Honda Civic. But for projects that we like, for Hyundai's, and we are on our own, so we are figuring things out. Progress is not as fast as we would like, but there is progress, and I can't wait to get to drive this car. Really. To be honest with you guys, I'm not a motorcycle guy. I'm really a car guy. But that does not preclude me from owning three motorcycles. The one that I like the most and probably the best motorcycle in my fleet is my 2012 Honda CBR 150R version 2, which is kind of modified to a certain extent. It was done by the previous owner and I kind of restored it to his specification. I don't really consider myself a motorcycle guy. I'm kind of afraid to ride motorcycles. It's more like seeing the hassles of motorcycle ownership. Getting wet while riding, going through checkpoints. There's also the safety aspect that you're exposed to the not only the elements but also to collisions. It's way different to have a cage, as the motorcyclists call cars. But besides that, I like riding bikes too. But given my background, I also feel for the motorcyclist, the motorcycle enthusiast, that they get a bum deal in Philippine roads. Aside from the checkpoints that I mentioned earlier, which I won't get into right now, motorcyclists are not allowed to use every road in the Philippines. When it comes to limited access roads like expressways, tollways, the vast majority of motorcyclists are not allowed to use them. It's because that there's this weird draconian archaic rule that states that motorcycles below a certain displacement, particularly if your motorcycle is less than 400cc, you're not allowed to ply onto our high standard, high speed roadways. When I went to Malaysia a few years back, I was obviously they have a very high standard of roads. They have a lot of expressways, tollways, and all that. And I'm looking at the roads and I'm seeing all these 150cc, 180cc underbones plying their expressways and going at the same speeds as the normal cars. And I talked to my host. What's up with this? In the Philippines, with this not allowed. How are you allowing this all these small bikes to ply your expressways? Well, he said it's allowed. There's no problem. They can go 100 kilometers per hour, no problem. And I think the anomaly is not the Malaysians. It's basically the Filipinos who are not allowed to ply onto these safer roads, safer, faster roads. Motorcyclists here are only allowed to ply on national highways. Technically speaking, it's more dangerous than the limited access expressways that are here. And I really wanted to figure out what is up with it. Upon my research, I found this good article from motodeal.com.ph. I don't know who wrote this, but it seems to be an op-ed piece. The article is entitled The 400cc Highway Dilemma. This article was written September 3, 2018. Apparently, the article says in 1968, during a visit by philanthropist John D. Rockefeller III to the Philippines, part of his agenda was to visit the International Rice Research Institute in Los Baños, Laguna. Motorcycle escorts from the police were assigned to the convoy, and the riders were supposed to wear traditional Filipino hats instead of their helmets. That weird move, that asinine move, that's not from the article, that's my word. That move resulted in the tragic death of one of the escorting policemen because he was wearing a straw hat instead of a helmet. The knee-jerk reaction of the typical Filipino politician was the predecessor of the DPWH, which is the Department of Public Works and Communications. They issued an administrative order entitled Revised Rules and Regulations Governing Limited Access Facilities, specifying that on limited access highways, it is unlawful for any person or group of persons to drive any bicycle, tricycle, pedicab, motorcycle, or any vehicle not motorized. No motorcycles were permitted to traverse limited access highways from then on. But in 1997, the TRB issued the revised rules and regulations on limited access facilities. They overstepped the original and already questionable authority granted by the DPWH. This statement effectively renders the entire NLEX and SLEX as limited access facilities. The coastal toll road, a road which motorcyclists had safely traversed for many years, would also be declared a limited access facility sometime in 1998 or 1999, thereby preventing all motorcyclists from using it. These draconian laws were hereby enforced and further enforced by the Philippine National Construction Corporation, which was the entity legally allowed to operate tollways under the Presidential Decree number 1112 issued in 1977. The PNCC is just the operator. They still get their authority from DPWH, and the head of that time was Gregory R. Vigilar. According to this article, he was known to express very strong anti-motorcycle sentiments. In 2001, now civil action happened. A group of motorcycle clubs representing over 5,000 members filed a civil action suit in Makati's courts, challenging the long-standing TRB rule. Thankfully, these guys were successful because in July of the same year, the Makati Regional Tri-Court 147 issued an injunction that ruled that motorcyclists have a legal right as licensed motorists to use the tollways. Then, afterward, the DPWH hastily issued Department Order 123, Series of 2001, seeking to amend the original motorcycle ban of 1968 by restricting motorcycles with only 400cc and up to use their tollways. There was no public consultation of the provisions, and this affected 99% of the motorcycle population at the time, because at the time, it was only 1% who had motorcycles that were considered big bikes or 400cc's and up. From 2001 till now, that has been the status quo. What has been enforced is this Department Order 123, Series of 2001. And this Department Order you can read at any time. You can search it at the DPWH website, and it's found several places in Google. So just Google it and you can read more about it. That's the scenario that we are in right now. What are the issues of letting smaller bikes apply through the roads? We have this issue in the Philippines called the kamote rider. Kamote is sweet potato in Tagalog. And kamote is actually a staple food of the poor. When you call somebody a kamote rider, you're basically disparaging him that or her that the rider is not very well skilled and is a buffoon in driving and riding his or her motorcycle. That's basically a derogatory and classist designation, which I kinda don't agree with. I rather call them idiots. I rather call them bobo than kamote, to be honest. I don't really see why we should continue with this draconian and ill-informed law that has been imposed on the motorcycle rider. Today's motorcycles are capable of cruising at 80-100 kilometers per hour. The maximum speeds allowed by our tollway operators it's only 100 kilometers per hour max. I haven't seen an expressway in the Philippines that allows you to traverse at over 100 kilometers per hour. And honestly, my 170cc motorcycle can easily cruise at 100 kilometers per hour, no problem. It can go with the flow of normal traffic. And nowadays, normal traffic is vastly reduced in speed because people are saving on fuel. A motorcycle's footprint is smaller than a car. On the footprint of a car, you could probably fit 4 motorcycles. I'm not saying that motorcycles have to share lanes or lane split, as they say. But the footprint of a motorcycle rider is far less than a car rider, while having fuel consumption at least 2 times better than the most fuel efficient small hatchback. So not only you promote better use of a scarce resource like fossil fuels, you also remove congestion or reduce congestion on our limited access expressways. And you also provide the motorcycle rider a safer place to use his or her vehicle to go wherever he needs to go. I understand very small motorcycles may not be able to keep up with the traffic of our limited access tollways, but a 150cc motorcycle could do it. I really propose that the powers that be seriously reconsider this 400cc displacement provision. And apparently, we don't need to go to Congress for this. We could just ask the DPWH to reconsider this and to issue a revised department order. It only takes a new department order to change things for the better for all of motorists. Vast majority of private vehicle owners are motorcycle drivers. This sector is the most oppressed one of all of Philippine motoring at its current state. It's really sad to say that we are really elitist on our roads. Of course, public transportation is very important, but it's not given enough priority. The second best thing to public transportation is motorcycle driving. It gets you to far distances by yourself, given this pandemic situation we're still in. Of course, motorcycles are not that safe, but it's way better than the decrepit public transportation system that we are having right now, that we have to rely on ancient jeepneys to go around, unscrupulous taxi drivers to hail, train lines that don't go anywhere, intercity freight trains and passenger trains that are non-existent, which became unused. It's right away filled with squatters. Metro Manila anyway, based on what I know, there's at least 20 million people here in the greater Metro Manila region. Improving their mobility is the most important thing for the greater good of the entire Philippine economy. Let us look for solutions that are easy. Because we can always tell our leaders, let's build more subways, let's build more LRTs, let's make all our jeepneys electric. Those things are hard. Okay, you guys are able to do bicycle lanes, that's great and all. But let us look for other ways that are also easy to implement, especially this one. You can make a profound change in the lives of not only motorcyclists but in the entire motoring public by just allowing motorcycles of lower displacement. Maybe drop it down to 200cc. Acquiring a 200cc motorcycle is not very expensive, and there are a lot of them available for the masses to avail. And probably a lot of them already have 200cc motorcycles. Maybe drop it even to 150cc because a hell of a lot more riders would have these motorcycles, and they would be able to ply our expressways with no problem whatsoever. No need to charge them a cheaper rate. If they're willing to use our expressways, make them pay the same rate. That should be a boon to the tollway operators, allowing lower CC motorcycles on the roads. Because there will be more of them, and they will not wear the roads as much as normal cars and the trucks and the buses that ply the expressways normally. So it is a win-win for everybody. The major concern that you guys may have is the safety aspect. That you'll have all these kamote drivers on the expressways. I believe that on balance, you will have actually a safety benefit. That you will save these drivers from more dangerous roads. Have you guys plied any of our national roads? are 2-lane, 4-lane roads where there's no limited access. Everyone can enter, exit, swerve, turn left, turn right, anywhere. Not only is progress slow, it's also dangerous. I really hope and pray that these guys, the powers that be, would consider lowering the displacement limit for our expressways. This is not an empty talk by just some podcaster, or let's just say radio journalist or opinion maker. I'm making a pledge to you guys that I intend to do something about it. And with your help, we might be able to make a very tangible difference. I will be writing position papers and letters to the powers that be, the relevant officers, government officials, and secretaries of the various relevant government agencies. And I will be definitely sending them. And my plan is to draft these letters and to upload these drafts for you guys to print, sign, and send to your local politician, your department secretary, tollway operator, and whoever else that can make a difference to help out Philippine motoring in our small way. So, guys, by the next episode of the Contact Patch podcast, I will be definitely presenting to you guys the letters. We could make a difference by practicing our right as Filipino citizens to voice our opinions and shape the laws that would benefit us and not a subset, and not definitely not 1% only of the motoring public. Anyway, guys, that's it for this podcast. I hope you guys will get charged up as I am with this topic that I feel most strongly about, and I hope to see you guys on the next episode. Hopefully, we could get into more regular releases on this. My plan was to release this weekly, but unfortunately, we have to skip a week because of health issues, as mentioned earlier. But hopefully, moving forward, we would be more regular. My promise is to do 3 regular episodes at the very start of this thing. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope to see you guys next time. Ciao, guys.